When talking about the big three, we usually focus on the main characters, but the protagonists aren't the only thing that makes these stories stick with us. It's also the people around them. These supporting casts are the lifeblood of their stories. They give us moments of heartbreak, hype, comedy, and sometimes even frustration when they're left behind. And here's the thing, each of the big three handled their supporting characters in completely different ways. Naruto built an entire generation of ninja around its hero, but often pushed them aside as the story zeroed in on Naruto and Sasuke. One Piece treated the Straw Hats like an ensemble where everyone's dream mattered, but slowly as the arcs went on, some of the Straw Hats started becoming less and less relevant. And Bleach? Well, Bleach gave us some of the most stylish and iconic side characters in shonen history, but they also struggled with how to balance them against Ichigo's spotlight. So in this video, I want to break down exactly how the supporting casts of Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach were written, how much importance they had, the roles they played, and what makes each series approach unique. Because when you really look at it, the way a story treats its supporting cast says just as much about its identity as what it does with its main character. So let's begin with Naruto. When you look at Naruto, the first thing that stands out is just how many supporting characters there are. The Chunin exams alone introduced an entire generation of ninja, each with their own quirks, fighting styles, and personalities. From Rock Lee to Kiba to Shikamaru, these guys weren't just background faces. They felt like fully realized characters, at least in the early days. And for a lot of fans, those arcs where we got to see their abilities and backstories are some of the most memorable parts of the series. Take Rock Lee for example. The guy can't use ninjutsu or genjutsu, yet his fight against Gaara became one of the most iconic battles in anime. The way he opened the gates, the weight drop, his sheer determination. It was a moment that made fans fall in love with him instantly. And there's Neji with his cold outlook on fate and destiny, setting up one of Naruto's most powerful thematic clashes. The whole fight where Naruto proves destiny isn't set in stone, that your future is something you fight for, that only worked because Neji's character was written to embody the opposite. In part 1, Kishimoto really nailed this balance. Each of these side characters didn't just exist to fill space. They carried themes, they tested Naruto, and they made the world of Konoha feel alive. The Sasuke retrieval arc is another great example. Shikamaru, Choji, Neji, Kiba, they each got their own spotlight fight. We saw Choji's emotional power up with the butterfly wings, Neji proving his resolve, and Shikamaru stepping up as a leader. It was Kishimoto showing that Naruto's friends weren't just cheering from the sidelines, they could also carry the story when needed. But here's where the cracks start to show. Once Shippuden begins, that massive supporting cast gets pushed further and further out of focus. Characters like Tenten, Kiba, and Shino practically vanish from the main narrative, and even fan favorites like Rock Lee or Neji barely get any meaningful moments in the second half. Instead, the story narrows down almost exclusively to Naruto and Sasuke. For some, this was frustrating, because it felt like so much potential was left on the table. But that doesn't mean all the supporting characters were forgotten. Shikamaru is the standout here. His arc with Asuma's death is one of the best in the series, hands down. We see him step up, take on responsibility, and eventually become the brains behind Naruto's leadership. By then, he's literally the Hokage's right-hand man, which feels like a perfect payoff for his character. Hinata also got her big moment during the Pain arc, where she confessed her love and stood up against impossible odds. And Gaara, though technically from another village, went from enemy to close ally, with his journey mirroring Naruto's in a powerful way. So with Naruto's supporting cast, you get this interesting mix. In the beginning, they were essential to the themes and emotional weight of the story. They gave Naruto foils, rivals, and friends who made his journey feel bigger than just one boy chasing a dream. But as the narrative shifted towards destiny, prophecy, and the cycle of hatred, a lot of those characters fell to the wayside. The ones who were developed deeply left a huge mark for sure, while some of the rest perhaps became wasted potential. Now when we shift over to One Piece, you immediately notice a slight difference. Oda doesn't really treat the Straw Hats like side characters at all. Sure, Luffy is the captain, he's the one who declares war on the world and takes down the big villains, but every single member of that crew is written like they matter. Each have their own dream, their own backstory, their own arc where the spotlight shines on them. It's not Luffy and his sidekicks, it's more of an ensemble where everyone's story is tied into the adventure. Think about how the series is structured. Arlong Park got to be Nami's arc. Enies Lobby got to be about Robin's past. And Whole Cake Island, that was Sanji's turn in the spotlight. And you could even argue that Wano gave Zoro a perfect chance to shine. Every arc finds a way to dig deeper into one of the crew's lives while still keeping the overall journey moving forward. That's why One Piece doesn't feel like it leaves people behind as much, especially in the early part of the story. Because here's a slight truth. The deeper we get into the new world, the more uneven the balance becomes. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji are consistently front and center, while characters like Usopp, Chopper, and Frankie often get less attention. They still have roles in fights or moments of comedy and heart, but they don't receive the same level of personal focus they once did. For some fans, this has been frustrating, because one of the greatest strengths of One Piece early on was how every crewmate felt equally important. That said, Oda still deserves a lot of credit. Even if the spotlight isn't perfectly balanced, the supporting cast in in One Piece is far from forgotten. Usopp still had his legendary moment in Dressrosa with the God Usopp scene, and Robin is still the key to unlocking the mysteries of Ohara and the Void Century. The story makes it clear that each Straw Hat has some sort of value, even if some don't get as much time in the sun as the others. And the brilliance doesn't just stop with the crew. Oda has this habit of bringing back characters you thought were finished. Vivi sails with the crew for just one saga, but she's still relevant hundreds of chapters later in the world's political plot lines. Law started as a rival pirate, and now he's basically one of Luffy's greatest allies with a great backstory as well. Even Kid, who wasn't exactly friendly, ended up being part of Luffy's biggest war effort in Wano. One Piece constantly reminds you that this is a world full of people chasing their own dreams, not just NPCs orbiting around the main character. And that's why One Piece feels so emotionally satisfying when you invest in the crew and the wider world. You're not just watching one person climb a mountain, you're watching an entire family of pirates, each with their own dream, pushing toward the horizon together. Yes, some characters shine brighter than the others, but we have to give respect to One Piece for keeping so many characters relevant even this late on into the story. Its world was meant to be more wide and expansive, while Naruto's was meant to be more tight and personal to the two main characters, reflecting the cycle of hatred. And finally, let's look at Bleach. At first it feels like Ichigo's closest friends are going to be at the center of everything with him. You've got Rukia, Orihime, Chad, and Uryu all introduced early, all with powers awakening, all seemingly set up to be Ichigo's squad. And in the very first arc, that's exactly how it plays out. They're training, they're fighting hollows, and it feels like this story is going to be about this small group of friends standing together against the supernatural. But then Soul Society happens, and suddenly the focus shifts. The entire arc is about saving Rukia, which gives her an incredible role in the story, but it also expands the cast by introducing the Gotei 13. These Soul Reapers instantly become fan favorites. They're stylish, they're powerful, they've got distinct personalities, and for many fans they end up overshadowing Ichigo's original human friends. This became a pattern in Bleach. Every new arc brought in new groups, and those characters often took center stage in battles. The Gotei 13 captains especially ended up carrying a lot of the hype moments, and while that gave us some legendary fights, it meant that Ichigo's Day 1 crew rarely got to stand tall in the same way. Take Chad for example. His introduction made him feel like Ichigo's rock-solid best friend, the muscle of the group with his noble sense of honor. But after a handful of early fights, he was basically sidelined. Then by the 1000-year Blood War, he's barely present. Orihime had a bit more importance, to be fair, especially in the Arrancar arc when her powers and kidnapping drove the plot forward. But even then, she was mostly a motivator for Ichigo rather than an active game changer. And finally there's Uryu, who got more relevance in the final arc thanks to his Quincy heritage, playing a crucial role in the 1000-year Blood War. But still, a lot of fans felt like his arc could have gone deeper. The exception to all of them here is Rukia. She might not have always been in the spotlight, but when she finally unlocked her Bankai in the 1000-year Blood War, it was one of the most satisfying payoffs in the series. Seeing her rise felt like a full circle moment for a character who started as Ichigo's guide. Renji as well went from rival to trusted ally, and got a good amount of shine throughout the series. So Bleach did deliver on some supporting characters, it just wasn't as consistent. On one hand, Kubo created some of the coolest, most iconic side characters in Shonen. Then on the other hand, he struggled to juggle them all. Some got incredible moments, while others were left behind completely. So instead of a tight-knit supporting team like One Piece, Bleach ended up feeling like a rotating spotlight. And to be fair, that rotating spotlight gave Bleach a unique flavor. It meant you never really knew which character was going to steal the scene next. The trade-off though was that Ichigo's original friends never lived up to the promise set up in the early chapters. So when you stack these three series side by side, you can really see how different their philosophies were about supporting characters. What's fascinating is how these choices reflect the heart of each story. Naruto was always about someone proving himself against destiny, so in the end the focus had to stay on him and Sasuke. One Piece has always been about adventure with friends, so the crew naturally shared the spotlight. And Bleach was built on style, mystery, and a constantly expanding world, which made its supporting cast a revolving door of cool but uneven characters. At the end of the day, all three gave us side characters who became fan favorites, whether or not the story always used them well. And honestly, that's one of the reasons the big three still hold up, because when you think back on them, it's not just Naruto, Luffy, and Ichigo you remember. It's Shikamaru playing shogi after Asuma's death, it's Zoro standing before Mihawk with unshakable resolve, and it's Rukia drawing her sword and finally unleashing her Bankai. So all in all, these supporting cast moments help the big three to feel even more legendary.